Hey everyone, it's Kenji. I'm going to show you some things to do with scallions. So scallions, they're a type of onion. I've got fresh scallions here, and I've got these kind of old scallions here. Old scallions, they're perfectly fine to use. You're not going to be able to use the greens. So generally, I might trim off those kind of limp greens like that and toss those. But what I like to do is that when you see down here, like the outer layers are kind of all dried out a little bit, and so what you can do is all you have to do is just peel those outer layers off. It's much easier if you're in sync, but I kind of rub my fingers up and down like that. And if there's any layers of the scallion that just kind of naturally pull off like that, if you gently pull your fingers up and down, what you find is that the stuff underneath is still perfectly crisp and usable. That said, generally you want to get the freshest ingredients you can find. So fresh scallions, when you have them, the way I like to store them, I get a little damp paper towel like this, and I'll put the scallions on top. I just give them a little roll. And that way you're kind of preserving the moisture in there. I give them a little roll, and then I'll either put them into my vegetable crisper like this if I'm going to be using them pretty soon. Either that, or you can stick them into like a compost bag, or if you have a reusable silicone bag, or if you want to like use plastic and kill turtles or make babies eat microplastics, you can do that too. But anyhow, paper towel around the scallion. That's the best way to store them. Some people will tell you when you get down to the white of the scallion that you can then stick that scallion white in like a glass of water and you'll get brand new scallions. It looks, it sounds too magical to be true, and it is too magical to be true. Like, first of all, you don't want to waste the scallion whites. That's actually, the part that has the sort of mildest flavor and the sort of the sweetest flavor, So that's actually like the really good part of the scallion to use. You want to use all the way down to the root. And secondly, when you put a scallion in water, and you let it grow like that, it will grow. There will be some amount of growth going on. But you're not really adding much flavor to it. And you'll find that because really the scallion, all it's doing is growing with water, whatever trace minerals you find inside tap water, but not really much, and just a bit of sunlight. That the scallion that grows back is not going to taste like very much. So to get a good flavorful scallion, you do need to grow it in soil. So that whole trick of regrowing a scallion in water, I wouldn't recommend it. All right, I'm going to show you a couple ways to cut scallions. The first one is just a standard slice. So I want you to listen real closely, okay? So I'm going to first chop up and down this is the way I used to cut scallions. One of my first restaurant cooking jobs, I remember I was slicing not scallions, but chives. And the chef walked by, didn't even look at what I was doing, and told me to throw out what I had done because she could hear what I was doing. And that's because, so when you chop straight up and down like this, just without any sort of horizontal motion, if you just go, you can hear that it's kind of like you're biting it, and you can also feel your knife kind of putting pressure on it before it actually slices through. And then when you look at the scallion slices that come out from there, they tend to be a little bit crushed like that. They don't look very nice. And that's important not just because of the way they look, but also it's going to alter the flavor. So scallions, like onions and like garlic, they have these precursor chemicals inside them that when you crush the cells, those chemicals get released. They interact with each other. There's a chemical reaction that goes on, and then it creates these things called lachrymators, which are the sort of sulfurous compounds that give onions their sort of real pungency and will also make you tear, like lachrymose, tears, lachrymators. And so your goal when slicing onions or scallions or any garlic, things like that, is to control the amount of those lachrymators you're creating. So really what you want to do is you want to cut without crushing. So the key to cutting without crushing is instead of up and down motion like this, you want to do as much lateral motion as possible. So that's where I like to use a technique called back slicing. So, where you might normally rock your knife forward like this to cut, hey Chen, where you might normally rock your knife forward like this to cut, instead what we're going to do is we're going to place our knife tip on the board here. We're going to start at the very back edge of the knife back here, and then we're going to use as much horizontal motion as we can with each stroke. So we're just going to pull it back slowly like that. You see, and you end up with these really nice slices. And so that's how you would back slice a scallion. And that's how you're going to get scallions that have the most sweet flavor and the least sort of pungent, really dank flavor, right? And if you want, those are little rings like that. If you want to do sort of longer, elongated rings, you can cut them at a bias. And once you sort of get going at this, you'll get a little bit of a rhythm going, and you start doing it faster. And like with any knife stroke, what I'm doing here, I keep this hand, my knuckles up, my knife against my knuckles, so that that kind of guides where my knife goes. you know. And so I adjust the thickness of the scallion slices by the rate at which I pull this hand back. So if I want thicker slices, I'll pull it back faster, you know. So another way you can cut scallions are what are called scallion hairs. I'll demonstrate on the greens. You can do this on the whites as well. In fact, here I got this one that has some amount of white and some amount of green. So to do these, what you want to do is cut your scallion down into maybe 1 to 2 inch pieces like that. Okay, and you can, if you want to be very rough about it, you can take these just as is and then back slice through them lengthwise, right, like that. And you want to go as thin as possible here. If you want to be real precise, you know, like if you're working at a fancy restaurant and they want you to be real precise, what you could do is same thing. You trim down your pieces like this, and then instead of just slicing through, what I'll do is I'll actually split it, just like that, with the tip of my knife. Split it lengthwise, and then I can open them up like that, right? Lay them flat, and then once they're laid flat, you can really get a nice thin slice. That is perfectly straight, doesn't have any loops, doesn't have any edge, doesn't have any sort of these you know, these V-shaped things that end up coming out if you don't slice them like that. But of course, you know, this is like really completely extra. You don't have to do this. This is like what you might go if you're at the world's fanciest ramen shop and they want to put scallions on your ramen bowl. You know. No, I used to work at a pizzeria that would top their. It was a grilled pizza place, and they would top their pizza with these scallion hairs. I've worked at sashimi bars that use scallion hairs. Now, what you might notice is that at this point they don't actually look that curly. They're kind of flat. So what you do, you get a little bowl of water. And you put your scallions right in it. And then you're going to let that rest. After about 5 minutes, you should start to see a difference. Maybe even less than 5 minutes, you're going to start to see a difference. But what happens is, as these scallion hairs sit in the water, through osmosis, they're going to absorb more water into their cells, and so they're going to become more rigid. Because, you know, when they're in this shape, when they're fully intact, the cells are all kind of glued together with pectin, and there's some amount of tension going on inside there. So a scallion's natural tendency, you know, if I was to do this, you know, split it a tiny bit like this, its natural tendency is for that bit that I split off to arc out like that, right? And so when you fill up those cells with more moisture, it's going to accentuate and it's going to exaggerate any natural tendency that the plant has. So instead of just having this gentle curve, once those cells fill up with water, almost like the same way that you're blowing up a water balloon, it'll become more turgid. And it'll end up curling itself over like this. And so that's what's going to happen to these tiny hairs. And because we're cutting them so thin, the curl is going to be really accentuated. So you can probably see even right now. Yeah, so you see how like nice and curly they get. And that's only going to enhance, you know, that curliness is going to get more and more the longer you let them sit. When you're going to use these scallion hairs, the way I like to do it, leave them. You can store them in water. You can store them in water right in the fridge. You can do this the day before you're going to have your fancy ramen party. Actually, let me get these into some water also so that they maintain their turgidity. All right. So when I'm going to use scallions that have been sitting in water, what I like to do is, instead of patting them dry on paper towels, or you might crush them, you instead use. So I pick up a little handful of them like this. All right, I'm going to let them drip dry, and then I will just throw it against my board, right, and use sort of the force of throwing it to dry it out. Right, and so you end up with a nice little curly pile of scallion hairs. There you go. Let's see, what's one more thing you can do with scallions? Oh yeah, here we can do this. So finally, this will be the last little scallion trick. Let's say you just cook some perfect mushu pork, or you cook some perfect Peking duck, and you want to serve it with some mandarin pancakes, maybe a bit of hoisin sauce. you've lost your fancy hoisin sauce mopping brush, right? So what you can do is you can make a little scallion brush. And so what I do is you trim off the white end as close as you can to the root, and then trim your scallion down to about, say, here, right where it transitions from one single stalk to multiple stalks. You can save those for another use. And then what we're going to do is we're going to split it lengthwise. You need a real sharp knife for this, by the way. You split it lengthwise, starting about halfway down, maybe a little less than halfway down. And then we're going to rotate it, split it again. Okay, and then we're just going to split it a few more times. I'm just kind of straddling it with my finger and my thumb to hold it steady. Okay, and so the idea is that right now we went from a quarter scallion, now we're at like octo scallion here, right? And you can start to not be so precise with this towards the end. It's okay if a few little pieces fall out here and there, but the goal is that you want to get relatively thin hairs of scallion, and so you end up with this I don't know, this whirling dervish thing going on, and you can put it in water just like you can with your scallion hairs, and what will happen is that those bits that you just, those legs that you just, the tentacles that you just cut out are going to curl up. Actually, even just sitting here for probably about a minute, we can see it happen. So we will sit here for exactly 1 minute. I'll just stare into the camera doing nothing. All right, while we're waiting for that scallion brush, I'm going to make little piles of the 3 types of scallions that I've been cutting today, so that at the end we can get a little look at them. Same thing, slam them. I do that with scallions, with herbs, anything that I kind of want to dry off. Any leafy thing that I want to dry off, I like to slam it. All right, so we got a pile of scallions there, sliced scallions there. We get our scallion hairs here, and finally our scallion brush. All right, so yeah, so this scallion brush, I would serve that alongside like a bowl of sauce that you can then kind of mop up and use to spread onto like a Chinese pancake, or if you want to use a tortilla instead, something like that. But anytime you want some scallion appropriate brushing action, I honestly can't think of too many times other than with Peking duck or mushu pork. But there you go. Sliced scallions, scallion hairs, and scallion brushes. 3 different ways to cook scallions, to cut scallions. And there you go, the back slice. That's the most important thing. Don't crush your scallions, slice them. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals. We'll have some more knife skills another time.